welcome back to In Conversation. We've changed rooms.
Again.
So this is the dining room, and we're looking out into the garden with eager expectation that we might actually get out there soon. In our In Conversation series at the moment, we're following a Lent resource called Lentwise, which is looking at spiritual essentials for real life. And this week, we want to spend some time reflecting on what gives us nourishment. What are those things that provide us nourishment and almost give us life to keep going day by day? And we're going to read something from the Bible in a minute, but I want to ask just a question first. And the question is this: what are those things that keep you going day in and day out? What are those things that nourish you and you get excited about? Those things that, equip you for the day ahead. And seeing as there's only one person in the room that I can ask that question of, what's your answer?
That's not fair. You didn't prime me beforehand. Jokingly, immediately the thing that came to my mind is tea, particularly when I have to get up at 5 a.m. with a bouncing 1-year-old. But seriously, I suppose those things that kind of keep me going, those things that give me life, are time with family and friends, work that I'm passionate about, stuff that I'm actively engaged in and enjoying, reading scripture, praying, in some respects the cliche classics, dare I say it.
Okay.
But actually I think it's kind of fundamentally about what gives joy. Yeah,
so I was going to say, anyone that's heard my Ash Wednesday sermon this year will know that one of the things for me is chocolate. So I enjoy eating chocolate, and actually again, we're filming this a couple of days ahead of Thursday, as you may have picked up. So today's quite a Zoomy day for me on Tuesday. So I've got Lent groups this morning and this evening. I've also got a meeting with someone over in the States this afternoon on Zoom. But I've also got Deanery Chapter, where all the clergy in the area. So I'm on Zoom quite a lot today. So actually something that's giving me a bit of life today and actually does regularly is just going out and being in the garden, just doing something small in the garden, sometimes doing a major project, but just being outside actually I find is quite nourishing.
I think at the minute as well it's almost having those different things to do. Mm-hmm. So it's almost felt like actually, particularly in lockdown, things have become a bit monotonous and the same, and particularly at the minute when we're restricted on where we can go and the things we can do, it can almost feel like nothing changes from day to day. So to have those little things in the diary that are somewhat different. I follow someone on Facebook who yesterday wrote as their status, "What exciting things have I got to look forward to this week? Oh, a podiatry appointment." But they were genuinely excited about spending 15 minutes with somebody that wasn't the person they lived with. And I kind of think that's the point we've got to. Definitely. Really.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask Jess to read from the Bible now. I'm going to try and make sure this doesn't turn into a sermon and it remains a conversation. But she's going to read from the Gospel of John, chapter 6, verses 25 to 35, I think.
That's what you told me to do.
Great.
Yeah. Jesus, the bread of life. When they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Jesus answered, "Very truly, I tell you, you are looking for me not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. For on him God the Father has placed his seal of approval." Then they asked him, What must we do to do the works God requires?" Jesus answered, "The work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent." So they asked him, "What sign then will you give that we may see it and believe you? What will you do? Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness. As it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." "Sir," they said, "always give us this bread." Then Jesus declared, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty."
Thanks, Jess. So, again, make sure this is a conversation and not just me preaching. But as we think about nourishment, what we're saying is, on the journey of life, and certainly for us at the moment, the journey of lockdown, what are those things that can keep us going in our journey of life, in our journey of faith, in our journey, hopefully, out of lockdown. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about the London Marathon, which happened in a strange way last year. It was a professional race only. The big charity race didn't happen. And I think they're hoping to go ahead this year. I can't remember whether, I think they're doing it this year. But the most dangerous point on the London Marathon course, I don't know if you know this, is Birdcage Walk. As people get to the end of Birdcage Walk and turn into the Mall. That's the most dangerous place, because runners turn into the Mall and they see the finish line, and so they pick the pace up and they start running faster and faster, but they don't realise that actually they've got quite a substantial amount of the Mall to run before they cross the finish line. And a lot of runners fall into the danger of using up their resources and their energy before they get to the finish line. So a couple of years ago, you may have seen on the news that there was someone that had done exactly that, and another runner sacrificed his own time to help this guy over the finish line.
Yeah, I remember that.
Incredible act of bravery and courage and self-sacrifice. But sometimes as people of God, sometimes just as individuals, we can get so caught up in life and running life that we forget actually sometimes we just need to stock up our energy levels and get some nourishment.
I guess there's something in that too, isn't there, about when you see the finish line in sight, you can spend so much time looking ahead that, as we talked about last week, you forget to focus on where you are in the moment, and how difficult it can be for us to take stock, as you say, to live where we are when the finish line is, or at least feels like it's in our grasp. Yeah,
so I think it's really easy for us to build in routines and habits that nourish us, but sometimes life gets so heavy that those habits just get thrown out the window. What for you are some of the warning signs that actually you need to spend a bit of time getting nourishment?
Largely I get overtired, which at the moment just is a permanent state. But I think when I feel like my creativity is stifled, so I can think about things like sitting down to write a sermon and just like having nothing. And often that's because like I'm so busy doing other things that I literally sit down for like the 10 minutes that I've got or the hour that I've got, and I have to do it then, otherwise it's not going to get done. And that pressure, if you like, almost just takes any sense of creativity and imagination out of me. Because I kind of think preaching is an art, and it's an art that kind of needs to be worked at and refined, and creativity and imagination are a huge part of that. So I think when I feel like that sort of stuff is stifled and everything just feels a bit like it's something I have to do, not something I want to do. I think that'd be it for me. What about you?
I feel like I get claustrophobic. So it feels like there's a box surrounding me and it's getting smaller and smaller. And so I guess the other image to use is a pressure cooker. It feels like the pressure just keeps on growing and growing and there's no way of releasing it. And I know that when I'm starting to feel like that, actually I just need to break out and go and do something completely different that is completely unrelated to anything that's sitting on my to-do list. And actually I can feel really guilty that I'm not doing work when I'm not doing this or not doing that, but I know I can't do that because the pressure is too much for me to be able to do it well.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think that was immediately going through my head actually, that it's really easy to just feel guilty. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday and they said, what are you up to? And I said, actually my diary this week is a lot freer and a lot quieter than perhaps the other few weeks, and I'm trying not to fall into the temptation of filling it up with other stuff. I'm trying to actually take the time when it allows to stop, to rest, to do those things that I enjoy, to even, dare I say, use the times when Samuel's at nursery and I haven't got loads to do, to just have a bit of me time. And yet it's almost like that goes against everything that we're used to or stand for, and particularly I think in our jobs, where the working hours are flexible, if you like, certainly different from your kind of standard 9 to 5. It's really difficult to kind of get used to that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So Jesus here is talking about nourishment, he's talking about him being the bread of heaven as opposed to the manna of heaven. And I think it's really important to make the distinction between the two. Manna is an Old Testament idea, Old Testament blessing from God, where the people of Israel were walking in the desert. They weren't getting a lot of food, and so God offers them sustenance and provision. And he says every night manna will come down from heaven, and we're told it's a little bit like bread. And in the morning you're to go and collect enough for that day. So that you've got food for that day, and the following night it will rain manna from heaven again, and there will be a constant provision. But God says only collect that which you need. If you collect more than you need, it will just go stale and rotten, and you'll find maggots in it in the morning. This is about a lesson of you learning to trust me. And we see the Israelites do exactly what God had predicted. They collect far too much because they're zealous, they're greedy, whatever. A bit like loads of us were when we went into lockdown for the first time, and we stored up toilet roll and all of that, which didn't go mouldy, but whatever. And he says, no, you only collect enough that you need, because I'm providing for you on a daily basis. And on the Sabbath, because they couldn't go out and collect, the day before the Sabbath, they were allowed to collect 2 days worth to get them through the Sabbath. But what you see there is their physical nourishment, their physical need is temporary. It's only met day by day. And so God provides for them day by day. And Jesus is making the comparison of that day by day need that goes stale, with him being the bread of life that says all of our needs will always be met in him.
Yeah, I was just thinking about when you were talking about the manna, actually, there's something important in that about how do we discern what we need.
Yeah.
And you kind of answered that in that typical kind of Sunday school way of saying, well, Jesus is what we need.
Obviously.
But I guess, put that to one side for a moment, how is it that we discern what we need? Because as you say, we naturally take more than we need. Yeah.
So I think for me, one of the things I learned whilst we were living by the coast, and as much as I love Cheshire, Stockport, Cheshire, I do miss the coast, because once a month I used to write out a day in my diary, and I used to go and walk along the beach, because I knew that's what I needed. And I knew that God would always leave me out by the beach, it's biblical, and he would just give me space, and I would spend time reflecting on the waves and whatever the weather was, and I always came back from those days completely refreshed, and that's what I needed. And as much as I love the Peak District and the mountains, it hasn't got the same feel for me as the coast. But I guess what I needed, and I needed it on a monthly basis, and probably still do, was just to go and meet God in his creation, and to make space for him to breathe into me in a way that he can't when I'm far too busy.
So in a sense, actually, what we're saying there is a link between what we need and the warning signs of when we're not getting the things we need, if you like.
Definitely.
So is that kind of where you were going with that?
Yeah.
Or,
I think so.
I think, can I come back to something that you were talking about earlier? You were talking about kind of, so to do with the race and kind of that not getting ahead of ourselves and not kind of falling into the danger that runners often do when they hit the mall. And you said something that I now can't think exactly what you said, and I'll probably kick myself when we watch this back later. But what it made me think about was, with the seasons of life, things change for us, and so perhaps what we need now might not be what we need when we emerge out of lockdown, or in a few years' time. And I certainly have been thinking a lot recently about the fact that the places where I have tended to go for nourishment in the past perhaps aren't places I can go at the moment, either because of restrictions or because the way in which our life has changed personally. So actually, I don't really have that kind of morning quiet time anymore, because we have Samuel, and kind of often it kind of feels like our days have to revolve around something else, and I feel like I'm often praying on the go more than I'm kind of sitting at Jesus' feet, as it were. So there's kind of a Mary and Martha wrestle in me there. But I just felt it's perhaps important to say that that's okay.
Definitely.
And that we should go with the way things change. And so actually at the moment, if you feel quite stifled and like you're undernourished, to use the phrase that we're thinking about, then that could be to do with what's going on around us.
I guess I'd say, definitely. Going back to my running analogy, I follow quite a lot of runners on Instagram just because I'm interested in running, and when I make space and the weather, I'm not a cold weather runner. I don't think after December.
I'm just not a runner, so go for it.
I want to get back into it, but actually the seasons change, and what runners do in seasons change. So runners in the winter, a lot of runners tend to either hit the track or they hit the trails. But in the summer, when they're preparing for marathons, they're doing a lot of road running to get them prepared for that. And their training plans change. And so as Christians, actually, in the seasons of life, as they change, our patterns of training, our patterns of nourishment, they need to change too. So for me at the moment, my prayer life is fairly rooted in the sofa, in the study, saying compline and morning prayer on my own. But as the seasons change, actually that will be more reflected in spending time in the garden and praying as I'm doing gardening. And the key part of that is, if we believe that Jesus is the source of life, and if we believe that Jesus is the bread of heaven that can satisfy us and provide for us and give us the energy and wisdom and power to serve him and to serve his world, how are we building in time to feed on him? Because, and I'm going to be kind of maybe slightly controversial here.
Controversial.
I don't believe attending Holy Communion services once a week or public worship once a week is enough to sustain anyone in their walk with Jesus.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. I think the thing I was thinking about when you were just talking actually is it doesn't matter if things are changing for us, because we worship an unchanging God who is the same yesterday, today and forever. So we need to almost take comfort in that. And I'm just thinking about something that Paula Gooder quotes for the chapter for last week, actually, that is perhaps more relevant for today. And she quotes the part in the story of Alice in Wonderland when Alice is having a chat with the Cheshire Cat, and he says, and she says, "Which way should I go?" Yeah. And he says, "Which way do you want to go?" And she says, "I don't know." And he says, "Well, it doesn't matter then."
Yeah.
And I kind of think there's something in that about the fact that, in a sense, it doesn't matter, because God will always lead us in the way that we should go, and He is the rock, He is the firm foundation, He is the kind of unchanging thing amidst everything else that is going on for us.
Yeah. And so as we continue to journey towards Jesus and to trust him in direction, just to slightly come back to my controversial point, if you're thinking in terms of an expedition or a journey, you stop certain places to have a larger meal or to have larger sustenance, which might be a service of Holy Communion if you read the metaphor into our spiritual lives. But that meal does only get you so far. Whilst you're on the journey, you snack. You have small things that just keep the energy levels going over. And those snacks are what we do with Jesus on the day-to-day basis, in between the acts of public worship with others.
Yeah, which I guess is what, in a sense, these conversations have sought to be about, and particularly one of the things the Church of England is looking at the moment with its Everyday Faith initiative, looking at actually how do we encourage and equip and resource people for living out their faith, Monday through to Saturday, or Monday through to Sunday, not just kind of having that focus that perhaps has been the case in the past of you come to church for, say, an hour on a Sunday, you go home again, and your faith has nothing to say to the rest of your week.
Yeah. So I guess our encouragement today is Jesus can be the nourishment. Jesus is the nourishment, and he can provide us with the energy we need to live out lives of service to him and to his world. And part of that nourishment is public worship, which certainly in Bramwell we're looking at resuming fairly soon. But I can't make any announcements yet because we haven't quite got there. But that's only part of the journey. That's only part of the nourishment, because Jesus offers so much more. And so I guess in the kind of couple of minutes, I guess we can have now some of the practical other ways in which we can receive nourishment from Jesus is embracing praying every day.
Yeah, and I actually think that's perhaps been one of the gifts of lockdown, actually, that obviously when our buildings were closed and public worship was suspended, we weren't worshipping in the same way as we were before. And lots of people have all of a sudden found that they can do these things when they thought they perhaps couldn't before.
Yeah, so praying every day, and that doesn't have to be sitting down with a prayer book and reading the prayers. It can be creative prayers, just as talked about, walking or whatever. But I guess another way is actually embracing some of our hobbies and giftings that God has given us, and using some of the giftings that God has given us just to enjoy time. So going out and gardening for me, going out and doing photographs, making things. I don't know, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think, well, lots of my hobbies, I guess, are restricted at the moment, but I think a big thing for me is music, whether listening to or playing. I confess I don't do as much of that as I'd like to. But also I was thinking reading is another thing that I think can be a real source of nourishment, and whether that be kind of Christian stuff or not. Every year I get a certain crime novel from a certain series, and that's my kind of go-to holiday book.
And I guess one of the other things that provides nourishment is talking to people. And I know that's slightly strained and more difficult at the moment. And I'm going to be repeating this time and time again, I'm just very aware, based on what the government announced on Monday, a lot of people are focusing on the finish line. A lot of people are focusing on the 21st of June. And maybe some people have forgotten that actually the government have put in there that they could extend the route. The 21st of June is the earliest it could happen. And they may, just like the finish line on the London Marathon never moves, but what the government have said is they may have to add in a few miles till we get to the finish line based on what things happen. So don't use up all your energy, don't use up all your resources, kind of just keep the pace for now, because and I think if you're someone that actually, as much as they've said it's about data not dates, if you are somebody that needs those dates, which I think actually inevitably we all are now, they've offered it to us, maybe look to the next date, not the one furthest away. So maybe look to the 8th of March and then the 29th of March more generally for us, and just take each one as it goes. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. And that's something about nourishment on this journey of faith, this journey of Lent, journey of life. Next week we'll be back with something talking about light and gaining wisdom. And because we're talking about wisdom, I'm going to let Jess lead that one.
Cop out.
Yeah, but I hope that's been helpful. Sorry that it's slightly long, and hopefully see you soon.
Take care.